If there aren't any more questions, Dr. Mitchell, thank you, sir. It has been an honor and a pleasure to have you with me here this morning.
It was wonderful having you speak to us. Thank you, Doctor.
Have a good day.
Edgar, see you later, sir.
Nice job, Will.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm not finished yet. Now I'm going to go into the samples that I have from the Apollo missions, which clearly show objects that Dr. Mitchell did mention that most of the crews did not see. And what I was able to do, first of all, my name is Will Allen, and on July 16, 2002, I documented a object above the U.S. Capitol dome, and it was interesting in that this particular object seemed to have been eluding me in terms of finding physical evidence of its existence. Well, because I do have friends like Dr. Mitchell and a few other astronauts, shared some information with me, and one of those pieces of information that was shared with me, actually two pieces of information, was this sample that's been on the screen most of the morning while Dr. Mitchell was being interviewed. And this sample shows a green fireball leaving Earth's orbit, and it was witnessed and photographed by Apollo 7. And the green fireball just happens to be 100% consistent with the green anomalies that I photographed at the U.S. Capitol building. And I did more research and found there were other pieces of physical evidence, such as this piece of photograph right here, which shows right here the green fireball leaving Earth's atmosphere. And what was even more extraordinary was that whatever these objects were, they were encountered by Apollo 11. And in encountering these objects, which Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin photographed, I was able to do a comparative analysis based on the physical evidence that was supplied to me by Apollo 7 and Apollo 11. And by doing so, what I did was I put all of the physical evidence, trace evidences together, and did a form of photographic analysis. And what I was able to do with Photoshop, for example, is Photoshop has a drop-down algorithm called Solarization. And Solarization affects colors profoundly, especially when they're normal earthbound, or what man would know as the standard swatch color technology. But when I applied Solarization to these objects, I noticed that in the center was red and blue, a red and blue core color. And this was from my sample from 2002. Note, the samples from 1969 are exactly the same.
Wow.
So what we're able to do is forensically, based on physical evidence, here and here, you notice that there is there. I can dim the lights just a little bit, please. But with Solarization, you notice that each of these objects has a core color associated to it. In both cases, red and blue. So based on the physical evidence and doing a comparative analysis means I take all of the photographs, which are consistently the same, and I put them all together. And putting them all together, you're able to conclude, based on the physical evidence, that whatever these anomalies are, they are 100% real. This sample was taken in 1991 during the deployment of the X-ray satellite. And if you notice, right there, two green anomalies, which were not maxed out by the NASA screeners when they produced.
Hey, Will, how did they lose that?
Well, I'm trying to figure that one out myself, but a closer analysis of this object showed that in space along with it was a cylindrical object.
Forgot about that.
But again, here's the sample from Apollo 7, and I applied Solarization to it, and look, red and blue, it's the exact same object. This is 1967.
Wow.
So I was able to, through other sources of information, these two particular pieces here, this piece here especially, was Boca Raton, Florida in 2010. So whatever these objects are, they're coming to Earth frequently. This sample was taken 3 weeks ago.
Wow.
It didn't have any information. I think it was based in Florida where they photographed this particular piece of information here. So I went further into the analysis, and here's the sample that I took from the U.S. Capitol building. You'll note right up in here are the formation of objects. And I was taken away by the fact that for the last few years, there were individuals who claimed that based on this physical evidence, that these objects right here were reflections based on the ground lights. And here's what's interesting about this physical evidence here. The ground lights are running east and west, but the objects in the sky are running north and south. So based on the physics of the lens and based on reflection and refraction theories that are usually commonly associated with lens flares in photography, if this was indeed a lens flare, what would happen would be that the lights on the bottom of the ground here would be inversely represented on the top, which they are not. So the samples clearly indicate, based on the physics of the photographs, that these objects and these samples are not based on the lights that are on the ground. Here's a more enhanced sample here. I used infrared scan technology called ICE scan technology, which was developed by Nikon. This sample is a film sample, and the sample that I used to do my comparative analysis, which was provided by NASA JPL, were 16mm film samples. So we have consistency in the physical evidence of the objects themselves. I'll go further. I did a more extensive analysis on the trajectory of this object, and I drew lines based on the objects in the sky and the path which these objects traveled and where the objects landed in Taft Park. And it was a most abstract evening, to say the least, to be able to photograph an extraterrestrial anomaly up close. And from what I gathered in photographing this object and standing beneath it for 3.5 minutes taking the photograph, that whatever these objects were, they generated a wormhole to leave the area. And with the photographic evidence that I took, I did a 3.5-minute photograph of this object. And within 3.5 minutes, the object started to oscillate and generate what I think to be byproducts on its propulsion system would make the air around it glow. So it left this, what one would consider a warp signature in Star Trek. You can see the object's trajectory as it moved forward. So in doing this research and looking at the events which were involving green fireballs, in 2007, a green fireball crashed into a village, into the center of a village in Peru. And the entire village became ill. And the United States government went down there and quarantined the entire village. And that was the end we heard of it. But their official report was based on the photographic evidence that was provided that what crashed in Peru was a meteor.